Well,
And you're now live.
thank you, Aisha. Welcome everyone to this evening's FBS Chat, and I'm really delighted that we have Jeff Chang with us, all the way from Canada, and Mark Mckergow is my co-host, fantastic, from Edinburgh. So welcome everyone. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I love these conversations, and I always fascinated about how Jeff, you came across the solution-focused approach.
Wow. I was working in a children's mental health agency. It was a classroom program for boys, 10 to 14. And we did therapy, and it was the blind leading the blind. Some of us had read Jay Haley, some of us had read Milton Erickson, some of us had read some Mnuchin, and we're trying to figure out all these weird brief therapy things that Haley and Erickson had been doing. And we were just probably being quite irresponsible. I don't know. But I was trying to figure out, how to figure it out. And my supervisor, a fellow named Dennis Ditchfield, gave me a book. And the book was Keys to Solution in Brief Therapy, 1985. By Steve. And it was like, literally the scales fell from my eyes. I just had a sense of, okay, this is actually a way to figure out how to do this crazy stuff. And at that point I was hooked. I went to Milwaukee in the early 90s a couple of times. And I will admit, though, I think one thing that I'm a bit known for is thinking from the lens of solution-focused and from narrative therapy, even before it was called narrative. So some might say I'm a bit corrupted by narrative therapy.
So you were in a classroom of boys from 10 to 14.
Yes.
Why brief therapy? Why was that important for you at that point?
Well, that's a good question. The families we were working with were, in those days, people would call them multi-problem families. And they'd been through all the same, usual like behavioral parent training, all these parenting skills kinds of interventions. And, sometimes the parents had some kind of individual therapy. And it was just a question of, like, we got to shake it up. Like, we have to do something different. And that's why the Erickson and strategic ideas and structural ideas were so appealing. Because, like, and really it was the dynamism of people like Sal Mnuchin and Jay Haley. These people are doing something really different. They're doing something that seems to work. And let's just do it. But what was so appealing about solution focused was that it Keys was actually provided some guidelines about how to figure out, like, it was still problem focused, but based on the characteristics of the problem, how do you intervene? So that's I think we just needed to do something different, and it was shiny and bright and new in those days too.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, the first time, well, not the first time we met once.
Yes.
At the Conversation Fest conference, which was in the States in 2013.
Yeah.
In Texas, that's right. And there was a big crowd of people, all kinds of kind of brief therapy people there. Mm-hmm. And the organizers on the first evening, they asked us to split up into 3 groups. They said, okay, collaborative therapists, followers of Harleen Anderson and Harry Goodishian's ideas, down that end of the room. Narrative therapists down the other end of the room, people who followed Michael White, David Epstein, and solution-focused people in the middle of the room. And there was a big crowd at both ends, and there were 3 people in the middle of the room. There was me, there was Eve Lipchick, who had retired, she claimed at that point, who was, of course, one of the key members of the Milwaukee team, and there was you. And you were saying, well, I think I should probably be down at the narrative end, but I think you guys looked a bit lonely. So,
Did I actually say that?
I don't think you did, but I think you certainly said, I wonder if I should be at the narrative end. I definitely remember. So talk to us a bit about the thing with narrative and solution focus and the interesting blurry line maybe with those things.
Blurry line maybe. Well, for a while I never really thought about it too much. I did the first couple of years. So we're talking now 80 up until about Michael White first came to Calgary in 1985, and then he came again in 1986, and I saw him, and I was working at a particular agency in Calgary from about 86 for about 5 years, and so we were just soaking it all up. We had the good fortune to be living in Calgary, and Carl Tom, of course, was and still is in Calgary. And Carl was bringing all kinds of interesting people, including Michael White. So we saw this. Some of us saw this similarity between what was then called exception finding questions and Michael White's relative influence questions. Because you're just asking in as much detail as you can about what's happening when things are going right. Or what's happening, or what are you doing? What's the client doing when things are going better? And what's different? And how are you actually doing that? How are you accomplishing that? So that was a similarity that we glommed onto immediately. And then, we were sort of foolish or arrogant or enthusiastic enough to start presenting about it. So my colleague and I, Michelle Phillips, and another person, Ann Lawson, started doing talks about this locally. And then we ended up at this conference. And we sort of rode this horse for a little while. And we the way you do a brief presentation, you sort of jot down some thoughts, then it was on an overhead transparency. It was pre-PowerPoint. Put it on overhead transparency and then get people talking. But then the challenge actually came when our agency brought Bill O'Hanlon to Calgary. And I sort of fibbed to Bill. I said, I found out he was going to this, he was one of the main movers in this conference, this Therapeutic Conversations conference that was to happen in Tulsa in June of 1991, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the core people at that conference were Bill O'Hanlon, Steve, Michael White, David Epstein, Carl Tom, Stephen Madigan, and John Weekland. I'm Michelle Wiener Davis. And I thought, I have to get to this conference. So I told Bill, well, we've got a presentation about this, and I've been working on a paper about this solution-focused narrative, sort of similarities and differences. And it wasn't really true that I had a paper. I thought about a paper, right? I mean, I still do this. It's like, oh yeah, this is written in my mind, but it's not really written. And then the doing is a lot harder than the writing's a lot harder than the actual saying you've got something in preparation, right? So I said, we've got we've got this paper, which we didn't. And so I ended up going without my colleague, Michelle. And, but this conference in Tulsa was like fantastic. And it was the first time I met Steve. So I'm getting off into a bit of a story. I was about to veer off into a story, but I'll veer back onto your question, Mark. The first thing that got us thinking about, as I said, about the similarities were relative influence questioning and exception questioning were kind of similar. And then there were some common roots in Bateson. At that time, Michael had been citing Bateson in that famous, it wasn't the first thing he published, but it was the first thing that he published wide scale, which was negative explanation, restraint, and double description template for family therapy, which was in Family Process in 1986. And then what I realized, now this is super geeky. This is like what therapy geeks live for. In that very same issue of Family Process, the landmark solution-focused article, Brief Therapy-Focused Solution Development by Steve and many others, was in that very same issue of Family Process, which I can't believe I never noticed that before. Only took me 34 years. But so we thought it was we thought that part was very similar. There was an appeal to Bateson. There was a bit of an appeal to Derrida, I think, at that point, if I remember correctly. So that's what seemed a bit similar to us. What happened later was, and as you may know, the folks who presented at that. So I presented this similarities and differences presentation at the conference, and then people who presented at the conference were invited to contribute to this book. That Therapeutic Conversations came out in 1993, and it was our chapter went in, and then I got much clearer because Michael used it as kind of an opportunity to talk around what we wrote and talk about what he wanted to talk about. And Steve said, basically, I don't agree. He says, this is what I think he said Wittgenstein says is a family resemblance concept. But there's no real, it's like the similarity between apples and pineapples. They sort of have the same name, but they're not really very similar at all. And so it really got me to think about this. And then, I really have to say that I've gotten more mileage out of this topic than anybody deserves to get out of one topic. I mean, I've been invited to do lots of things just based on the fact that we certainly weren't the only people to be thinking along these lines. I'll give lots of credit to Matthew Seligman, too, that many of the viewers will know. And a couple of guys named Joe Aaron and Tom Lund from the U.S. and upstate New York. But I think we got out there first with these ideas. So I've been super fortunate to get invited to talk about this and ride it a bit over the years. And then a buddy of mine, David Nyland, and I, who David's a narrative therapist and trainer in Sacramento, California, as part of a special issue I edited of Journal of Systemic Therapies, we did a 20-year update on the previous paper I wrote with Michelle. So I think they're both based on the idea that language constructs reality. It's not just a representation of reality, but you're actually speaking a reality into existence as you're having purposeful conversations with people. But I think they've, since the early 90s, narrative therapy and solution-focused therapy have distinguished themselves from one another even more. But I still kind of mash them together in my day-to-day work.
You said earlier that there was a story that you might leave. What was that story, Jeff? I'm fascinated to know.
Well, so those of you who have met Bill O'Hanlon will know he's a bit of a trickster. And so people are laughing because that's the understatement of the century, right? So Bill's a bit of a trickster, and I said, I talked about this paper that I was going to present at the conference, and he said, I said, I don't know, frankly, I'm a bit nervous. To Bill O'Hanlon, I say, frankly, I'm a bit nervous about what Steve will think of this. I never met Steve before. So Bill, and I don't know whether it's hard for me to know. I don't know Bill that well. I've been to some trainings with Bill, and we brought him to Calgary a couple times. He says, Steve really likes it when people argue with him. So just tell him what you think. And so I don't know if he was like if you're a child and you tell another child to go swear at the principal, if it's similar to that, you're probably in trouble. Or whether he was being sincere. But anyways, I took the bait, and I met Steve in the hallway. It was like the night before the conference, and people were milling around the registration desk, and Steve was standing off by himself. And I said, I went up and introduced myself with a bit of trepidation. Say, "Here, my name is Jeff Chang. Good to meet you. Read all your stuff." He goes, "You're on the program here, aren't you?" And I go, "Yes, I am. I'm kind of talking about your work and about Michael White's work." And he says, "Well, I don't see how you can say there's anything similar between what I do and what Michael White does." What, unbeknownst to me, is that up to that point, he had never actually seen Michael White. So I don't know what I said. And then I said, like summoning up all the courage of a little boy who's going to tell the principal to, F off or something. I said, "Are you yanking my chain? You mean you don't see the similarities?" And then that led to a real, quite an interesting conversation in the hallway at the hotel, the DoubleTree in Tulsa. And we just had a bit of a chat, and that was it. And then the next morning in the breakfast line, we were, I was in the breakfast line, and Steve was sitting by himself. And he points at me, and with his long arm, he goes, like, to come over to sit with him. And so that was an interesting breakfast, right? Because, he's a man of few words in almost every context, right? So it was an interesting conversation. I don't even remember what we talked about. I just remember that we sat at the breakfast table and sort of talked with each other. So yeah, it was. That was how I met Steve. I hadn't trained with him.
So Jeff, lots of people watching this in the UK anyway will be solution-focused enthusiasts and practitioners. Maybe you could share something from a thing from the narrative world that might be interesting and useful to practitioners who are coming from a solution-focused place, but are looking to kind of, broaden their practice a little bit. What would you suggest?
Okay. I will tell you. Well, before I do that, I will. This one might fit. The other one I think will fit. So the first one was I was at a training. I trained the trainers training in Milwaukee, and I was talking about just one of those between sessions breaks, coffee break or something like that, and I was talking about just having fun externalizing the problem. And somebody who now is quite a senior academic said, "Why would you want to externalize the problem? That's problem focused." And I said, "Because otherwise I get too bored with myself." I'm really, I think, have had a bit of, I think that solution focus is my first language in therapy, and I'm fluent in narrative, but it's really it's a second language for me now. But I think one idea that I think is a useful idea, and I think it's probably been stated in different ways, is narrative therapists have an idea, using an idea called the absent but implicit. And that's from, I believe that's from Derrida. And it's what people sort of don't talk about that they would treasure or that they would prefer in their lives. And we're all about preferences. We're all about and I've been writing a little piece where I'm sort of summarizing sort of my version of solution focus. It's going to end up in translated into Norwegian. So I've been reading old stuff, and I've been reading newer stuff, like some of your stuff, Mark, and some of the stuff from Brief, your side of the pond, and also from Guy Shannon. And so I've been reading about really how thinking has changed. And I think it's a very good fit to think about the absent but implicit in the same basket as preferences. And what people talk about and imply that they would like, but they don't actually say it. And I think that this is maybe, my main job is as a counseling professor in a fairly conventional program where we're not teaching any particular model and sort of relying on common factors. But we want to teach people counseling skills and to be really good listeners, right? I mean, it's something that you do as a really good listener to hear what people are kind of hinting at or not saying. And if you think about it through the lens of preferences, like many contemporary solution-focused people are thinking that way now, preferences as opposed to exceptions or miracles, then I think it fits right in there, the absent but implicit.
Mark Matt is asking, do you consider narrative therapy a strength-based approach? Or do you consider it strength-based?
I'm going to parrot both Michael and Steve, who both said something similar. If you reify strengths, logically, you have to reify problems. If strengths are something that live inside somebody or they're inherent in somebody, then you also have to believe, to be intellectually consistent, that problems reside inside. So I actually have never, I think on the whole, and we talked about this, Dave Nyland and I talked about this in our article in 2013. I think on the whole, it's better that people talk with practitioners talk with clients about strengths and what they've got going for them than talking about problems. But I've never really talked with people about their strengths. I'm much more inclined and attracted to talk with people about what they're doing that's helpful and that's working for them. And that's different because you can talk about a strength all you want, as long as it's something that's, when you frame it that way, it's not operationalized. It's just, okay, well, fine, you're persistent or you're perceptive or something like that. But what I'm actually way more interested in is, what does your persistence enable you to do? What does your perceptiveness, how do you show that? How do you exercise that? And how is it helpful to you? So I don't object to strength-focused approaches. I just, that's not where I go. That's not how I default.
Okay. So when sorry, I don't know. Obviously, you started off with boys 10 to 14, and I'm guessing. I don't know what difference did it make to you? And when you're in a session with a client or a family, is it when you have both kind of narrative skills and solution focused skills? How do you know when to bring those in? Or do they not? Or do they not cross over in a session?
I think the easy answer is, and I've been pretty immersed in both, so for different periods of time. I think the answer is when the opening makes itself obvious to me in a session. So if I think about it, I don't actually externalize the problem all that much anymore. The last couple presentations I've done at solution-focused type events have been about listening for openings or noticing openings. So there's a number of things that I kind of look for and see as something that I'm going to highlight. But the other thing that really, I think, invites me into more narrative-informed thinking is when cultural discourses seem to be influencing people in a particular way. So the most obvious sort of low-hanging fruit to talk about that is when there's particular ideas about gender and how men and women should conduct themselves in the world and act, and how that might fuel how clients' ideas about what it means to be a competent woman or a strong man or whatever in our culture. And again, our culture, and I'm referring to Euro-American culture, Western culture, how those discourses influence people in particular ways, and could fuel patterns that don't work particularly well. So that's where I get I get drawn into thinking, using a set of questions that sort of that surround cultural discourses.
So
it's Mark. Mark,
oh, sorry.
Yes.
take turns, Joseph.
All right.
So, Jeff, we've met at the Conversation Fest thing
Yes.
in Houston. We've met at the Taos Institute Associates Jamboree thing in Santa Fe. We've met in various places. And quite often it seems to be you and me are the two SF people who are there to some extent. And I'm wondering if people who are listening to this, who are in the Solution Focus camp, why do you go to these other things, get involved at the, because I do as well, and I think people are missing out if they don't explore those kind of areas around the edges. So I want to hear from you. Why do you enjoy exploring around the edges of what we do?
Well, other kinds of events have been specifically sort of, I don't know, labeled or branded as social constructionist events, Taos Institute. And, the Conversation Fest was largely collaborative language systems folks, Harleen Anderson, folks that are influenced by her work. And I think that, and I've met many of those folks, and I like them. So I like to find out what's going, and the idea of cross connections has always been really important to me. I tell people sometimes, like, I've actually taught. I don't teach narrative anymore. I've taught 5-day narrative therapy intensives in a graduate course, and 5-day solution focused intensives in a graduate course. And I've sometimes said to people, well, I'm going to pretend to be like purely narrative or purely solution focused this week. And I can sort of do that because I'm sort of adequately trained to do that. But I do think that it's really good to and Mark, you've been one of the people who've really taken this forward really very much, to think about closely connected. I mean, these are all kind of our cousins, our theoretical cousins. And I think that we're more similar than we are different. And if you compare us to biological psychiatry or traditional sort of diagnostic discourse, we're more similar than different, and we need to kind of stick together, right? And Michael White said one time that we're swimming together in a sea of disrespect. Disrespect being the rest of the traditional mental health system and establishment. So I think we have more in common than is different. And the idea that language constructs reality instead of just representing reality is very powerful.
Gil Green asks, Jeff, I am curious as to why you have been moving away from externalizing the problem.
Oh, man.
You thought this was going to be easy.
Well, smart people asking me questions that make me think. I don't know. Partly I'm not doing that. I mean, this is a bit of an excuse. This is not really a true answer. I haven't been doing that much therapy, so I have had less opportunities. And I think I was always attracted to doing it more with kids, although because it's a playful way to approach things. And so I think I've done, like, seeing individuals and couples. I think I've done what I might call a softer version of it. But there you go. I'm not exactly sure why.
Should I type that in? He does not know.
I don't know.
There you go. There you go, Gil. He just
Sorry
does
to
it
disappoint
because
you, Gal.
It works.
Beg pardon?
It just works.
Yeah.
And if it works, you do more of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jeff, this this sea of disrespect. I think I get what you're saying, but how is it important for us to get out of this sea into the world of respect, or does it not really matter?
Well, I think it's a luxury to get out of it, like to get out of public, like, where I live, public sector, publicly funded mental health. So in Canada, similar but different to the UK, right? We have government-paid health care, but one thing that we and some public mental health, publicly funded mental health services. So, there are some people here in Calgary who have devoted themselves to narrative practice, and they do that on their own. So I think, there's and in the publicly funded mental health system, or agencies, they're always concerned about doing more with less. They're often underfunded, and there's a ton of pressure on somebody. So what's unfortunate in some ways is, as soon as people have the skills, and sometimes they may stay in a publicly funded job while they're becoming licensed, because it's supervision's included in their work, and some of them fly the coop for private practice almost as soon as they can, and so those of us who work from a I'll use collaborative or social constructionist kind of way. I think get discouraged working in public mental health because we're definitely swimming upstream. So I think it's unfortunate when people who have a heart for working this way, solution focused, narrative, collaborative language systems, open dialogue method, lots of things that are in this, kind of in our camp, so to speak, that these voices need to be in public mental health. And public mental health sometimes doesn't make it easy because underfunded, understaffed, overburdened. So that's difficult. There are many people, and there's some great books out where people have talked about their work in inpatient psychiatry and in the justice system and the child protection system and with domestic violence perpetrators. These are areas that really need fresh thinking that I think we bring. Very often, highly skilled, collaborative, more collaborative people fly the coop because they want to do things their own way, and being in the public system sometimes is very discouraging.
So, Jeff, you talked there about how the public system is perpetually underfunded and under-resourced and has too much to do, which, of course, that resonates over this side of the pond as well, the same thing. But solution focused work in particular, in all that social constructionist thing, has always had a focus on efficiency, bluntly. Steve DeShays was very keen that therapy should take as long as it takes and not one session more, famously.
Right.
It's been a puzzle to me for nearly 3 decades now. How come that this approach that seems to basically work quickly most of the time is not being embraced wholeheartedly by these public mental health systems, who you would think it was in their interests to get people in and out the door as soon as respectfully practicable? What do you think about that?
Well, that's a mystery to me too. There's been some pockets. I mean, I can speak to here in near Calgary in Cochrane, just west of Calgary, Lance Taylor, who many people who are watching will know. Lance worked in public mental health for a good long time. Managed one of the outpatient mental health clinics, and my read on it, and his influence spread to some of the other clinics that operated on the outskirts of Calgary. I just think that by and large psychiatry runs the show in public mental health. I mean, Carl Tom, a psychiatrist, now coming on 47 years running Calgary Family Therapy Center. Again, not solution focused, but still sort of a theoretical cousin. Psychiatric residents or medical students come through, for part of their rotation, and they're just blown away. But as a young practitioner, or just maybe a newly graduated, newly qualified psychiatrist, where do they get to bring these ideas forward? I think that the system is just so all-encompassing. And I admire people like Mo Yi Lee and Adriana Yuken and John Siebold, who work with, done so much work in the intimate partner violence space. Carl in psychiatry. A fellow named Blaine Moore in Texas, who works with men in the correctional system who are domestic violence perpetrators. I just respect their work so much, and they're bringing this different way of working into spaces that aren't really hospitable. But it's just so dominated by, at least in Canada, so dominated by traditional psychiatry. It's just hard to make a dent.
Am I allowed to ask a couple of questions?
Of course.
Gentlemen, on behalf of Gil Green, how do the common factors affect the city of this effect? I knew you'd
no, come on.
I knew you'd like that one. I've been saving this one. You think this is bad? I've got a worse one coming after this.
Oh no. How do the common factors affect? I think that's a bright spot. I think that the work that Scott Miller and Barry Duncan have done have really made an impact in some of these large systems. The whole country of Sweden, and some of the and there's a great example of routine outcome monitoring where Scott's worked, and several other people have worked with people in Calgary at a large agency called Calgary Counseling Center, which already had a very strong, I'll say, family therapy tradition with many of the staff there. But the whole routine outcome monitoring, outcome management that they're doing there, whole hog, has been really, I think, really useful. And I think it's not surprising, that Scott doesn't identify himself, I don't think, in particular as solution focused these days. But of course, that's where he came from. And I think, for my money, and this is not anything that I I've seen a couple of I saw a presentation at the last SFBTA by I'm blocking on it. Beverly, Beverly I'm sorry, but it was on how solution focused approach potentiates common factors. And I think that it's kind of easier this is how I look at it anyway, it's kind of easier for solution-focused therapists to buy into common factors because we're already doing lots of the things that maximize common factors. But I think the common factors as a movement is a real bright spot in making a pretty big impact on the traditional mental health systems.
Was it Beverly and Adam?
Adam, yeah. So yeah, Adam.
How did you know?
Beverly Court and Adam.
Googled it.
Oh, you Googled it.
I'm good like that. Just Google it.
I just couldn't even believe that's a senior's moment. I couldn't even believe I blocked.
All right. One more question from Mark, and then whoever's turn it is can take over. But I think this is for the three of you to answer, actually. Has the role of money and funding become too important for social issues and mental health, and what could be the alternative? I think this is quite an interesting few-minute discussion. Mark, what are you doing to them? See, this is why I'm the admin person, you see.
Okay. Well, I thought you said it was for the three of us, so I was expecting one of the other two men to
You can kickstart it.
Money is too important for everything. And you know, I can do lots of the interesting things that I get to do because I have a secure and decent paying job as a professor, and my side work with high conflict divorce in private practice also pays very well. And I'm not quite sure what systemic changes need to come about. Some countries, I think New Zealand and maybe Iceland, have been thinking about gross instead of gross domestic product, gross happiness as a product, right? I mean, I think it's a fundamental shift in the way governments look at things. I don't think it's necessarily left versus right. We call them New Democrats here, Labor on your side of the pond. It's not Labor versus conservative. I think it's a fundamental shift in values. But I mean, that's massive.
Here in Scotland, we're part of a movement called the Wellbeing Alliance, which is New Zealand, Iceland, and Scotland, who are all working on this agenda about well-being as a key indicator of a healthy society. So I'm very pleased to be, involved a little bit in that here in Edinburgh. About the thing about money and funding, it seems to me there's this kind of pull in two ways. One is that, and it's about practitioners, honestly. So if a practitioner gets paid umpty dollars a session, it's in their interests to have lots of sessions, fundamentally. Whereas it's in the interests of society that they see clients as effectively as possible and get rid of them so that they can see more clients. And this is part of the thing I was mentioning earlier about the juxtaposition of models and long-term versus short-term, and efficiency and the importance of efficiency. And there's a big thing, I think, still in society that says that long-term therapy is good because that means you had a very serious problem and it's good to get over it. And short-term therapy is a kind of sticking plaster. But if you went to people with cancer and said, by the way, we've got this amazing new cure, you can be cured in 3 weeks of your cancer, people would be lining up around the block to take it. And so there's a funny juxtaposition about the interest of the practitioners, which is to have not many clients for a long time, and the interests of the world, which is to have lots of clients, but help them quickly. And it seems to me that one of the ways this is going to be resolved is not by psychiatrists reforming themselves and saying, "Oh my God, I was mistaken. Oh, no, I apologize. I'm so sorry." That's not going to happen. I used to hope that would happen, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think what's happening is that what might have been called mental health stuff is being dealt with around the edges, with things like community groups and support groups and all sorts of things where people can plug into things that help their well-being and therefore don't end up in a place where they need to go for professional therapeutic help. And so maybe people will find that they can live their lives better without recourse to heavy-duty professional help. And that may be something that will help us all in the end.
I agree with that.
And sadly, in the UK, young people may have to wait up to a year before they're seen, which is awful. And on the one hand, obviously, if you have a waiting list, then you can prove there's a need for my service. So sometimes having that long waiting list means that I can actually maybe have to employ more people, more qualified people. And this going back to this sea of disrespect Jeff was saying earlier about, once people get qualified and leave these, NHS services or big organisations, can't wait to get out there and feel free to do their own thing. Unfortunately, unless there's an SF version of that where it's recognised, we're kind of always going to be seen as the second cousin or the less favourable option. So it's something in the future maybe that needs to be looked at.
Mark's going to sort it out.
Mark's going to sort it out.
The flip side is the commodification of therapy, right? Like, I had this was in the 90s. I had a conversation with Steve, and I said, "Did you ever think these ideas were going to be that popular?" He says, "The ideas aren't popular here in the U.S. So it's all to do with managed care, not the ideas." He says, "In Europe, they love the ideas, they love the aesthetics of the ideas, but not here." So it's driven by sort of service efficiency and how many units of service did we generate. And I think that's not a bad motivation per se. I think the other thing that happens is that there's a lot of people who say, and again, this is going to sound like a solution-focused elitist, but here goes. There's a lot of people who say they've been trained in solution focus, and they probably had a workshop for a day or two. And have they done deliberate practice to learn the skills? Have they learned the thinking behind it? Are they just question generating people, question generating machines who ask questions in sequence and don't know how to listen to clients, or don't know how to notice openings? So, people say, I tried solution focus and it didn't work. And my outside voice says, well, maybe you didn't do it well enough. Because people also think any model of therapy, they think it's the model that's potent. It's not the model that's potent. It's the model as delivered by, that's not even a great word to use, because it's if you think about, I'll go off on a rant about, I know you want to move on to something else, but I'll go on a rant about psychotherapy research. We chose the worst possible model of trying to be like pharmaceutical research, as if the delivery system is inert. Now, we're all happy today because the first people got the COVID-19 vaccine. The delivery system, it's, nurse A sticks your arm, nurse B sticks your arm, it doesn't matter. It's the treatment that does the pharmaceutical concoction that does the job. It's different. We're the delivery system. The relationship, your person is the delivery system. So when people say solution focused works, doesn't work, CBT works, doesn't work. I tried CBT and it didn't work. I tried ACT and it didn't work. Whatever. It's because it's the delivery system. And, you know, so there's that. But, sorry, my.
No.
Good.
He said he thought that the research showed that everything worked at the level of 68% effective.
Yeah.
That was the research. But the bit that nobody seems interested in, and I'm interested in, is 68% of people get better. But how long does it take for them to do that?
Yes.
This is the key unasked question, really, in all that outcome research, which is how long does it take to work, and how many people could you have seen for one person in 15 years of psychoanalysis if you'd been bothered to look at that? And it's an underexplored question still. And this is the answer to waiting. It is focused on treatment that is both effective and efficient. And people in the mental health world hate, in a way, they kind of recoil from efficiency. Oh, you're prioritizing your horrible goals over my client's feelings and needs. And, yes, I am, because if your client is better, then they won't, they'll be off somewhere else doing, playing football, or painting, or looking after their kids, or whatever the hell they do, rather than, being trapped in a system of coming for therapy every week or whatever.
Yeah.
Jeff, why on earth did you get into high conflict divorce? That must be a minefield.
The honest answer is that the fella I was associated with in private practice, who took me under his wing, had lots of overflow business for me. And at that time, I was very motivated to develop a full private practice. So that got me in. What got me staying there was, I think, and I'm staying there. I'm there. I think what got me there was what kept me there was and relatively successful is all the solution focused background that I have. So listening to people without a lot of theorizing, and just listening to people as they wanted to present themselves. Thinking about, and this is a bit old-fashioned in the solution focused world, thinking about their motivation in terms of the old visiting relationship, complainant relationship, customer relationship. I've found that helpful because when I'm writing a report that actually makes recommendations about how much parenting time each parent should have and other things that people should be implemented, I can write to the each client's receptivity to potential interventions. You can say what you think is right, and people are court ordered into these assessments that I'm doing, and there's all kinds of baggage around the court order. It's like the court order says that I'm permitted to speak to anybody I want to, and that they have little or no right to confidentiality, right? So I can speak to it's very intrusive, and it's an exercise of societal power. But I try not to be that way, right? So listening to people as at face value as much as I can, making recommendations that fit for what they're fit with what they're receptive for. I think that's helped me be pretty good at this work and to actually stay out of trouble, because people do, it is the most complained about, hugely disproportionate number of complaints relative to the amount of work that people do. So I think I've managed to keep keep clear of trouble reasonably well. And I do have a little chapter in Denise Youssef's recent book on doing therapy in situations when high conflict co-parenting influences a child's, distressing to a child. I'm really solution-focused, influenced. What I do might not look solution-focused when I'm doing the sort of traditional interview about somebody's family history or whatever that I have to do for these assessments. But I kind of hopefully bring a solution-focused presence to it.
Fantastic.
If I just give a little plug here, there's a review of Denise Youssef's book, including Jeff's chapter, and lots of other solution-focused books in the latest edition of the Journal of Solution-Focused Practice, which is now an online, free-to-access, peer-reviewed journal. And statement of interest, I am the book review editor. But it's a great resource, and it's free to access for anybody now. We have support from groups like the SFBTA and other groups around the world to publish it, and it's online and it's available now. And I hope we can find a way to get a link into the chat, because it's a nice book, and the whole journal is really a must-read, I think, for lots of solution-focused people. And I'm delighted it's now free and online.
Mark, would you mind putting the link in the private chat, and I can share?
I will do that.
If you don't mind. See, Mark is such a brilliant co-host. I'd replace Mark with you any day, Joe.
He's doing half of your admin. So what's
Jeff, very quickly, Jeff,
yes.
there are lots and lots of questions coming in, but we don't actually have time to go through them. So I've tagged you into this post so you can kind of go through it at your leisure and answer them, because I have a feeling that a few people will kill me if they don't get the answers. But sorry, go on, Joe. Thank you, Mark.
I'm too long-winded, sorry.
I was just going to ask Jeff, is there anything exciting down the road that you're working on, or things that you hope for in the future?
I'm trying to bring. I'm writing a bit on clinical supervision, and I'm writing a bit on high conflict divorce, and I'm trying to bring a solution-focused sensibility to both. So that's what I'm doing.
So maybe we've got a couple of minutes left, and say a word about supervision, Jeff, because I think supervision is a really valuable thing, whether it's peer supervision or expert supervision or whatever. So maybe you'd say a word about why supervision's a good thing for our viewers tonight.
Those of you who come to solution-focused work as therapists, for therapists, it's universal. You have to get supervision to become a therapist, either in your graduate school training, or in some places you have to get supervision to be licensed. So given that it's a universal thing that therapists go through, it should be really good. And there's lots of research to say that it's not very good. Quality is very uneven. There's research on harmful supervision. People have had uneven experiences. And the other thing I think is that supervision is a distinct professional competency. So you have to do some book learning about it. You have to have a knowledge base. But I think it's also important to be able to, in some places, there is supervision of supervision. In some kinds of doctoral programs that are accredited in the US or Canada, the AAMFT requires approved supervisors to have supervision of supervision. But most people default to doing what if they haven't been trained, they default to doing what their supervisor did that they liked, and avoiding what their supervisor did that they didn't like. So it is, I think, a distinct competency base. And that's why it's important. And I think that bringing a solution-focused kind of ethos, it's like bacon. It makes everything better.
I am so going to quote you on that every time. Like Jeff said, it's like bacon, makes everything better. And with a smile.
You can use that.
Wow. Who would ever
other
thought?
questions?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Go on, Joe.
I was just going to say, I think the first time because obviously I've never met Jeff, but the first time I saw you was at SF24 back in August.
Okay, yeah.
How amazing was that? What did you?
It was the whole world.
Mm.
You know, I miss the going out for dinner and going to the bar at face-to-face conferences. But I think it'd be a real shame if we didn't do SF24 again.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an event.
Yeah.
The plans are underway. I can tell you that
You
much.
stayed up. Did you stay up for 24 hours?
22 hours.
There was a rumor. Okay, there was a rumor going around. Yeah.
Oh yeah, about how long Aisha managed.
Yeah.
22 hours. I actually fell asleep and then opened my eyes and Emma Burns was in front of me. I was like, oh my God, I missed. Yeah, you can imagine the state of me after 22 hours, but I made it 22 hours. So I've got to reach the 24-hour mark next year, August.
It really felt like a festival, proper world festival of solution-focused work for me. I was up late on one session and I got up early and the sun was coming up here in Edinburgh to go to another session, and it really felt like being at a festival. You know, you're slightly and these different people are coming by and you say hi and then 18 hours later you see them again in the background or something. It really felt like a world community. I thought it was fantastic.
I mean, I think for Joe and I, selfishly speaking, had we have attended a physical conference, we would have probably spoken to a couple of people that we would have met before at brief because we didn't really know anyone. And I think even though COVID is a terrible thing, it's really helped us broaden our horizon in terms of solution focus, meet new people, make friends, new colleagues. So now when we do actually see each other physically, we wouldn't be, oh, it's just Joe and I from a small charity in Enfield. We'd be like, oh my God, it's Jeff. Oh my God, it's Mark. Hugs all around. Because that's the only beauty about the whole world of internet is because whether you like it or not, you are in breakout rooms and you do have conversations. When you're there physically, you tend to only speak to the people you know and maybe speak to one other. But now I feel more confident that when we do go to any, we've got Soul World, we've got lots of things coming up, it will be a case of, oh yeah, I am this short. You didn't know that, did you? And have those sort of conversations.
And it's lovely the way Mark described it, because it reminds you when we went to a festival in Hyde Park, so you could choose which stage you went to and decide which act you wanted to see. And that's what was really lovely about it. Yeah, brilliant.
Well, guys, we've actually come to the end. Gil Green says an hour of Jeff Chang is enough.
Not everybody agrees with you, Gil. But
no, I think we all agree with you. And when we interviewed Mark Mckergow as well, it was just like, oh my God, we want more. Because you both have such a wealth of knowledge, and Joe and I learn from each and every person that joins us on FBS Chat and other Zoom or Teams or whatever events. But you two both of you are a massive inspiration, and we are better coaches, facilitators, SF practitioners because of everyone that we've met, especially you two. And the first time I met Jeff, I was in complete awe and admiration of his work. And I was like, I need to know more about this guy. I need to know more. And Mark, the same. It's like, Mark, what don't you do?
Yeah.
It's like, he's like a walking, talking encyclopedia where if I need something, it's just go to Mark.
Well, he has a man of many talents.
Yeah, brilliant guy. So Well, I definitely agree with Gil, but if I could just ask you both to just stay there so we can say a thank you to you privately. But everyone else, this has been absolutely brilliant, and we'll see you next time on another FBS chat.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Bye.